everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters, and the questers that are Josh and Dan. I am Dan.
I am Josh.
And we are episode 97? Am I reading that right?
I think this might be 98.
98, I'm sorry. I missed one. So yeah, we're 98 episodes in.
The last few weeks of recordings have been scattershot for us, so we make do.
But it's all to make sure that you don't go without. So, yes.
I think episode 96 was the one that went up today.
Fair. So we're a couple ahead, which is not bad. I got no problem with that. I like being ahead of things. So on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things eroentical and quizzical, because we have exactly one email to get to, a point to make from the episode that went live today, and then we'll get to Icewing, or better known, Dollmaker, in the future.
Yeah.
In a few minutes. So we'll get there. First, we have an email from Rameth0. Josh finally read me his name right.
I think that's how it is.
I'm going to go along with that.
I think so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm probably wrong.
That's what makes the most sense once I realized that the 0 at the end is actually supposed to be the O in 0.
Ah, yeah, there you go. He's more clever than I am, and I'm going to give you all credit for that, dude. Sorry. I caught on now. We're good. Josh is smarter than me, too. Hey, Josh and Dan, has there been any consideration towards an adept profession surrounding alchemy, or would that cause a vast rift in the current scheme of talents and knacks surrounding alchemy with respect to magicians? And if you could implement such an adept profession, what would you dream up, and how would you make it work given the world of Earthdawn? Enjoying the podcast, Rameth0. So take it away, Josh. That's a ton to digest there.
This is a topic that has come up in the past, not necessarily that we've talked about on the show, but it has come up in the past. I don't know that there is enough stuff to justify building an entire discipline around an alchemist.
Fair.
I don't know what you would provide it in terms of abilities that would make it necessary.
Perhaps making it a path? Would that be better? That we only have like maybe 5 ranks or 5 things and specialize it a little bit, shoehorn all that stuff in there?
But even then, what are you going to give it? Like, you've got alchemy as a skill.
Yeah.
What other abilities are there that you would fill in? The advantage of that at that point is, okay, it's no longer a skill. You get it as a talent with the ease of improvement that goes along with that. But I don't understand what the advantage would be. I don't understand what the need for it would be in terms of getting it as a discipline. There's just not enough there, I don't think, to make it something that's worthwhile even to develop as a path. And it doesn't really have anything to do with the treading on the toes of existing knacks and abilities and so forth that the various crafty adjacent classes, disciplines are, like the weaponsmith or the elementalist or the nethermancer.
Yeah.
There's just not enough there, and I don't quite see what kind of need there is to have an entire discipline to fulfill that. There isn't enough that strikes me as special or unique or anything like that that would necessitate that.
Or even a unique enough perspective to make it into a path to say this is their view of the world and their purpose for being, to tack it on as a path to a discipline. I agree. What are we searching for?
I don't understand what people who are looking for that feel is missing. I don't understand what is not being served within the existing framework of disciplines and the knacks and stuff available to them in terms of enchanting / alchemy. It has not been sufficiently explained. Let me step back. I understand people's desires to play crafty, enchanting characters like that. I completely understand that as a desire. I also recognize that the weaponsmith fills kind of a unique niche in a sense not only for Earth Dawn, but in fantasy gaming in general, as being a discipline that in large part revolves around the whole idea of crafting and enchanting to a secondary effect.
Creation, yeah.
But I don't understand, or I have not had it sufficiently explained to me where I can understand what people think.
How they could expand upon alchemy and or utilize it to its fullest?
Well, no, it's not that. It has not been sufficiently explained to me to the point that I understand what is lacking within the existing framework that we need to, that there is this apparent need to create something all on its own. I don't get it.
Fair. So let's
again, it's not that I don't get the desire to play an enchanter / alchemist type character. Yeah. What I don't understand is how what is available currently does not fulfill that need in some way. And if somebody can do that, great, but I don't know that there is enough stuff that would be able to fill out an entire discipline that wouldn't either end up feeling like something like a weaponsmith with 1 or 2 talents swapped out, or a magician type with 1 or 2 talents swapped out. I don't see the need for it.
Fair. Let's proffer this.
So consequently, to the kind of second part of that, I wouldn't, so I don't have any thoughts about how something like that would be put together. Aside from giving them alchemy as a talent, what else do you give them?
Fair.
That's the big question, is like, make a discipline that revolves around around alchemy. Okay. You give them alchemy as a talent. What else do you give them? What special things are missing? What kind of talents or abilities? Are there enough ideas? And I don't mean you need to come up with 15 circles worth of stuff, but maybe 3 or 4 other talents that would be special or unique or whatever that would fill that out. Unless you start breaking down, well, instead of just giving them alchemy, you give them craft potions, and then you give them craft common magic item, and then like you just give them like 4 or 5 talents that are just all basically the same thing that dilutes and weakens the process.
Instead of taking that overarching umbrella of alchemy, which is the precursor to chemistry, instead of taking that and then you as you said, parse it out into little tiny segments.
So I'm repeating myself now. So yeah, there's my answer.
That's okay. I figured let's proffer this up. If anybody, so Rameth Zero, if you have a small dissertation, and I do mean a small dissertation, on what exactly the Alchemist discipline or path would look like, or anybody else has a small dissertation as to what's missing, what will be included, and so forth and so on, send it to us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Josh and I will both read it, lampoon it mercilessly. I'm kidding.
No.
We'll both read it and take a look at it and see what we're missing, see what we're not informed of.
I am more than happy to listen to people who want to try and explain what is lacking.
If you've got a good idea, send it. We'll at least discuss it.
I obviously can't promise anything, but we cannot
promise
I come up short.
Yeah.
I come up short when kind of thinking about it myself. See, the question is asked, have you considered this? Yeah, the consideration is you've got alchemy that you give them as a talent. Okay, what else?
Well, yeah, because alchemy right now is a skill, and over the course of the 4 editions, it hasn't needed to be upgraded. It hasn't needed to be changed. Alchemy is kind of like this all-encompassing thing.
Yeah.
Make it work for you.
You start giving them abilities that allow them to do stuff maybe like more enchanty related, a little bit beyond straight alchemy. Okay, but you can already do that with a weaponsmith or an elementalist. There's plenty of opportunity for you to play a crafty, enchanty character without needing to create a whole discipline around it.
New one. Yeah.
I don't feel like there is enough missing to necessitate that.
Fair. I'm okay. So instead of continuing to beat this dead horse, let's move on to our analytical portion. But we have
got
a thought
a
to
comment,
add.
a little bit of insight. The episode that went live today, this morning, as we are recording this, was the episode 2 episodes ago. Yes. Our previous dragon episode where we talked about the visitor from Cathay, Dvilgaynon, and
Josh posed
Prosperi.
a question. Yeah. You posed something that maybe Josh would know.
Lou Prosperi offered some insight with regards to Dvilgaynon and perhaps some insight as to why some things were set up the way they were in Living Room Games' essay about her. And that is to remember that in the Living Room Games version of the war, there was a change to the way the dragons were dealing with Vivane. Rather than doing a ritual that would unmoor Stormhead and bring it down on the city, they performed a ritual that put this elemental dome over the city, and it was that attracted Stormhead. And that possibly Dvilgaynon's strong association with elemental magic would be something that would be of interest in terms of the dragons being able to do that. Lou was a little bit uncertain that the great dragons of Barsave, when working together, would have actually needed that kind of assistance, but that's fine. Lou didn't have any real particular insights with regards to, what might have gone on with Dvilgaynon, or, did not spill any secrets in terms of what he had in mind sort of back in those tail end of first edition days, but did have, I think, what was an interesting insight into maybe some of the reasons why there were details in that essay that there were. And I think agrees maybe a little bit with the notion that I had that the entire idea of Dvilgaynon being there at Mountainshadow's request seems a little bit odd.
Yeah, fair. I read through the discussion as well. I kind of skimmed it here and there. So I think your point and Lou's point was the same, which is it could have been better. We got what we got. We're okay. And happy to either retcon or, as Josh put last time, if you like it, use it. If you don't, move on. So we're okay with that. Shall we just dip into Icewing now? Anything else we should bring up?
No, I think we're good. Let's talk about Dollmaker. I have referenced now several times in past Dragons episodes where he comes up.
Yeah.
And now finally we get to talk about him.
It's kind of why I saved him for second to last, because last is going to be Vastenjas, who's no longer with us. But Icewing is the one everybody's been clamoring for, so I saved him for second to last on purpose, because this is a long essay. We could cover this one could take up most of an hour episode by itself, because
this is the longest one in the book, I think. Is it longer than Mountainshadow? That's the other long one.
So let me I'm not sure of the word count, but I can at least take a look real quick on.
In the PDF version that I have, because I'm looking at the original, not the Dragons.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, there's no art. It is 7 pages.
It's exactly as long by, I think, a paragraph as Mountainshadow, if not longer by a paragraph. So I think Mountainshadows has a smidge of dead space at the end. Other than that, yeah, these are 2 very long essays, Mountainshadow and Icewing. And they should be. They're brothers.
Yeah. The Mountainshadow essay is about the same length.
Yeah. We'll go with that. So Icewing is not just a great dragon. He is an elder dragon. And I'll get right to the description right off the bat because it was buried somewhere in between there. But he's got these silvery blue scales. So, which kind of goes along with the whole notion of the coloration is linked to the environment or the kind of magic that they use. And so silvery blue scales, Icewing, there you are. And my wife asked me the question earlier. She said, well, which dragon are you talking about tonight? And I told her, and she's like, wow, okay. Because I said, here's how he got the name Icewing. And that was the part that kind of blew her mind. She's like, well then, yes, that's an appropriate name. Because he can beat his wings as fast as a hummingbird and cause this ice storm on an opponent. And it takes a couple of rounds to completely encase them in ice. So we'll just go with, that's where he got the name, because I was always very curious how Dollmaker became Icewing, but he has that special power that he can use. But Icewing is what the name givers call him. Dollmaker is what, of course, the dragons call him.
Yes, because he was the one that spearheaded the creation of the Drakes.
Yeah. So since Icewing and Mountainshadow came from the same clutch, they're the same age. And of course, as dragons get older, they keep increasing in size. So Icewing and Mountainshadow are, of course, gargantuan in size. They are just big, massive dragons that are vast in not only knowledge and power, but three-dimensional space, I guess. His Icewing's knowledge and skill, as you can imagine, is just as vast as Mountainshadow's, but his main interest is in creation and propagation of drakes and summoning and communicating with any and all spirits, whereas Mountainshadow is all about gathering information and all of that. Icewing has a little bit lesser involvement in that. He really is about the propagation of drakes, servants, and a whole network of people working for him.
Yep.
So Icewing and Mountainshadow, like I said, same clutch. They are actually sired by Allwings, spawned by Allwings, and raised to be. And Icewing was raised to be proud and vigorous leader among dragons. So he has this idea that he should be in charge.
Yes, I would like to, I think, clarify here where the Outcast says that he was spawned by Allwings. I don't think that means that Icewing is actually
the father.
Yeah, that Icewing was actually from an egg that was laid by Allwings. I don't think that was the case. It's possible. We need to keep in mind the dragon's life cycle. Mm-hmm. The eggs that would have been given to Allwings, who would have been at that time sort of equivalent in stature at that time that, say, Mountainshadow and Icewing are today.
Yeah.
Allwings is, the closest thing to sort of draconic royalty that there could be. And so any dragons that would have been raised by Allwings and survived to the point of becoming great dragons would have been given the training and education to sort of assume that same kind of mantle. Again, I think this is a case of the Outcast using particular language that is more metaphorical than literal.
Fair. I was imagining the word spawned as in raised by Allwings instead of DNA sired by. It's, he helped with the egg making. No. I go the whole operational term of family versus biological term of family for Allwings and Icewing and Mountainshadow. So, during the Age of the Dragons, Icewing befriended the children of Alchemist, and these are the elves. So there's a connection there as well. And with Yuichotol, the other great dragon who's no longer with us, created and invented the Dance of the Blue Spirits. So Icewing is involved primarily with the creation of drakes.
Yes, you skipped a lot there.
I did. So by all means, my notes kind of go all over the place.
Yeah, so Icewing was kind of charged with overseeing the relationships between the dragons and those they ruled. And it was sort of in that capacity that he had the relationship that he did with Alchemist's children, the immortal elves. But the part that you skipped over that I want to call attention to is the Outcast saying, despite his close relationship with them, he did not foresee the betrayal that was lurking in their hearts. He underestimated their capability and so was taken advantage of in a way. And so therefore, Icewing kind of bears a little bit of a grudge, not to the extent perhaps that Alchemist does.
No. But
still bears a little bit of a grudge with regards to what happened, which informs in part his relationship with the Theran Empire. But yes, it is in the wake of that betrayal, the schism between the dragons and their progeny, that led to his development of the creation of the drakes.
Yes. So the betrayal we're speaking of is the immortal elves.
Is basically the immortal elves rebelling and trying to overthrow the dragon's rule.
Yeah, fair enough. Want to make sure, because it's been a few episodes since we covered that, so I want to refresh everyone's memory. But yes, he and Yuichotol created the magic that allows drakes to come into being. And so they called that the Dance of the Blue Spirits. And they therefore taught everybody else how to do it. And Icewing primarily uses his drakes on infiltrating and disrupting the Theran Empire in as many ways as possible.
Well, and all sorts of other things. We will get to this. Icewing has a lot of drakes.
Like I said, primarily against the Theran Empire. There's secondary and tertiary, but yes.
That was the initial, like, him and Yuichotol and Cloudtamer.
Yes.
All kind of used drakes against the Theran Empire because the Therans were founded by immortal elves, and the dragons and the ongoing sort of conflict of the Therans wanting to provide their own protections and the dragons, that whole like ancient family squabble, which we've talked about before.
Yeah. Because the Therans wanted to charge money for it and so forth and so on. And the dragons are just like, this is bad enough. Nobody should be charged money for it. They just need to go underground and stay safe. Period. And because Icewing sent all these drakes to infiltrate the Theran Empire and disrupt their orichalcum mining and their money gathering and their rights of protection and passage disseminating. That's why the Theran Empire targeted Cloudtamer and Yuichotol and Icewing, because they're like, oh, no, you don't.
Yes.
And there we are.
And Icewing managed to escape that because he had one of the Eyes of All Wings and kind of saw it coming and managed to escape that. Mountainshadow talked him down enough that Icewing just kind of made an example, had his drakes kill a bunch of important people, and then perched on top of the Sphinx and was basically delivering the message saying, stop screwing around with us.
Yeah.
And it was that the détente between the Therans and the dragons existed, and decided to shift to being a little bit more subtle in some regards about his vendetta against the Theran Empire by turning the Kingdom of Thrall into one of his pawns in
pet project.
The game. By giving the Dwarf Kings of Thrall the potion that extended their life, essentially gave House of Alis Varulus, the line that Varulus and Nedin came from.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They would develop the same kind of long view that
the dragons
the immortal elves would have, and the dragons would have.
Yeah.
Looking at something in a more sort of multi-generational scale as opposed to
a single generational scale.
A single generation and the typical kind of problems that you would run into with a dynasty that, would be lasting for generations.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's all part of Icewing's deal.
So he had this propagation of drakes infiltrating the Third Empire. That got settled in, like you said, kind of a we agreed not to hurt each other mode, unspoken, and then turns his attention to, as you said, the Kingdom of Thrall, King Varulus and Nedin and so forth, and that family lineage to help them out. The part I find I can't say hilarious, interesting, is that he was somehow able to convince the council to let him create and give that longevity potion to that dwarven line. He didn't just do it on his own. He actually was sanctioned. The council actually said, yeah, that's okay. You can do that. I find that interesting.
Well, yeah. Icewing's approach towards the younger races is a little bit different with regards to his brother.
Mm-hmm.
He has, in some regards, a much stronger sense of the draconic superiority, is similar to what you get from, say, Usun.
Yeah.
But he is also a lot more cunning and careful, and he recognizes, in some sense, the need for dragons to rule, but that it is better to do so clandestinely.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Usun is much more of a, I don't even care. They are gnats and beneath my notice. Icewing recognizes to one extent how much they can shape the world, and so therefore it is important that we control the way that they shape it.
Yes. Guide them to shape it properly.
At least from the presentation that the Outcast gives, even with the lessons of the rebellion, Icewing continues to underestimate the potential of the younger races and what they are capable of doing.
Yeah.
And that his pride and arrogance in the sense of knowing what is best for them is his great flaw and shortcoming.
Fair.
I get the sense the Outcast doesn't think highly, for the most part, of most of the other great dragons. I think there is something especially personal between the Outcast and Icewing. You get a sense of what the Outcast thinks about each of the dragons as he talks about them through these essays. But the sense that I get about Icewing is he's so close and yet falls so short of not living up to the potential. And he is not as highly regarded as he thinks he ought to be, and that rankles him. I think the Outcast maybe even has convinced himself a little bit that Icewing is jealous of him in some regards. Whether that's true or not is an open question. I think the Outcast is perfectly capable of a great amount of self-deception.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But he's not... So Icewing is not just guiding and manipulating the Kingdom of Thrall by himself. He actually has some help in this. Earthroot is also, as we mentioned before, helping to do the physical location of Thrall, and changing the pattern and all that. But so he doesn't work alone. Icewing is, slightly arrogant and powerful and so forth, but he's not going outside the council.
Right. Well, we talked about this a little bit with when we discussed Earthroot several weeks back, whatever episode number that was. There will be times where Icewing will get a little upset with something that Earthroot does, and Mountainshadow kind of needs to smooth things over between them.
Yeah.
Which is another example of the place where Icewing feels like he is due more than he receives.
Yeah.
Or that his opinion should be considered more highly.
It should carry more weight.
He is less diplomatic than his brother is.
Yeah. But if you have a best friend or a sibling like that, I've been there. Occasionally you gotta go talk to your
Yes, there is. I mean,
friend.
presumably the Kingdom of Thrall is a joint project between Icewing and Earthroot. Icewing trying to guide them more socially in terms of their development, whereas Earthroot is kind of magically reinforcing the defenses and protections. But it's very interesting. Obviously, the essay here, both the original version and the Living Room Games 2nd edition revision, which really doesn't change much of anything.
Yeah.
An interesting question and something to perhaps think about if you are going to be involving Icewing in your game, and something that we are considering as we develop the ongoing story of Barsave and Thrall in particular, is there's a new dynasty on the throne of Thrall. Yes. And it is not one, at least as far as I'm considered at this point, that Icewing really had a hand in selecting. I think one of the things that I like to play with as a concept, or to kind of bring in as a concept, is to show how, despite their experience and centuries of patience and preparation and plans, sometimes things can just get away from you. And the fact that Nedin presumably died in the conflict against Thera without any clear offspring or heir, and so you end up with a civil war in Thrall where you've still got the old guard and the reformers and various other things, and you kind of end up with this new king that is much weaker in some regards than presumably or apparently. I mean, we haven't done a lot to explore that yet, but that is sort of the concept that's sort of going through my head with regards to that change. Is the greats can't control everything. Sometimes stuff happens that is beyond their control, and it may be that Thrall, to a certain extent, is a little bit out of Icewing's control, at least for a little bit, as he tries to figure out how to re-exert his influence on the kingdom.
Yeah, because he was working with Varulus and Nedden to strengthen the bonds between Thrall and Carafad and the Europagoi and everything else. And all of a sudden, that just all comes poof. It's unraveled by the death of,
Yeah. But also, as the flip side to that, the dragons have time. A little bit of civil unrest in Thrall, a little bit of withdrawal and isolation by the Dwarf Kingdom, and a little bit of time where some of the various powers are maybe needing to fend for themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially after the success against the Therans. I mean, even if it's a couple of decades, what is that in the lifespan of a dragon?
Yeah, like a couple of days.
Yes, it's probably annoying, but
you just have to rebuild your house of cards.
I don't think Icewing would necessarily view it as a disastrous event.
No.
It's just, oh, okay, this has happened. All right, well, gotta kind of rein this thing back in, but there's other stuff going on, and yeah, okay, we'll deal with this.
It's a setback. That's all it is.
It could potentially end up being more significant of a setback, depending on what goes on.
Yeah. It's like you're building this whole big, structure out of popsicle sticks and glue, and you run out of glue. Okay, that's a setback. I'll go get more glue. That's all he needs. And so he just has to find his way to this new king, and you're all set.
I like the idea of the immortals, both the immortal elves and the great dragons, and sort of these ancient powers that are doing what they can to try and manipulate the world.
Yeah.
Or I like the concept of them being fallible. I like the idea of them making mistakes and being short-sighted occasionally.
Just like everybody
or
else.
Having blind spots that can be exploited.
Yeah.
It makes them more interesting and in a sense more quote-unquote human as characters, more compelling.
Yes.
In much the same way that Alakia is like ridiculously compelling, despite being this ancient, powerful being, she is also incredibly vain. And all of the tragic Greek Shakespearean style flaws that go along with such tremendous power.
Absolutely. So another interesting thing about Icewing, because most of the other dragons we've covered are working by themselves or living by themselves and maybe only occasionally reach out. He's actually allies and networked quite well, obviously with Mountainshadow, but he's also working with Earthroot, and the cultivation of Thrall as an ongoing political power, but he's also allied with Aban. So he's got these connections going on that not a lot of the other dragons actually have.
Yeah, I mean, between him and Mountainshadow, presumably the Council of Great Dragons of Barsave is a council of equals.
Yes.
But it's also kind of clear that it's the Mountainshadow and Icewing show, with the others kind of providing support in some ways.
So it's kind of like the Justice League, but you have Superman there, and if you didn't, it's not quite the same.
But Icewing and Mountainshadow are the elders. They're sort of like the previous generation. They are, in some sense, the current dragon royalty amongst the greats. And then you've got Usun and Aban and Earthroot, obviously being different because he's not native to Barsave. He's from Cathay. And Vazdanjas, the other sort of great dragons of Barsave are kind of like the next generation down and having their own stuff that's going on. We talked about Aban being like super concerned with making sure that she was getting her due. As sort of the youngest great dragon, that she was making sure that she was getting the respect that she deserved. And so there is, on the one hand, yes, we are all equals, but some of us are more equal than others. The actions of the Council of Great Dragons of Barsave and the overall kind of overarching goals are ones that are largely driven, I think, by Icewing and Icewing's ongoing sense of betrayal and spat with the Theran Empire because of what happened with the Immortal Elves, what happened with the rebellion and who the outcast refers to as Alamaze's children, but as Mountainshadow pointed out, that they weren't just Alamaze's children.
Yes.
The story of Barsave, in that sense, the story of Earthdawn, is the story of the struggle between the great dragons and their wayward children being played out through proxies that the powers of Barsave and the Theran Empire are game pieces that the immortals are using in their ongoing struggle against each other.
It's a wonderful little soap opera there.
Oh, yeah.
In every sense of the word. Love all of this. So let's get to some other quick little things about Icewing that makes him different than the other dragons, great or lesser, doesn't matter. He doesn't just have one lair either. He lairs mostly in Mount Vapor, which is in the Thrall Mountains. It's outcast rumors he knows he has a second lair in the Tylon Mountains, where he's got a small clutch of eggs as well that he's raising. And he actually guesses that there's a third lair in maybe Vivane, and possibly even a fourth lair that nobody knows where that is. So, Icewing likes to get around a little bit. He's got like a summer home, a winter home. And I'm curious who gave him that clutch of eggs to raise. So Icewing's got more to go on. So he's got the next generation of dragons after this one. So I find that he's got more than one layer. He's got a network of connections going on. So he's a busy guy otherwise. But he does have an affinity toward the lesser races. He has an actual open door policy, more or less. If you would like to go see him, it's a treacherous climb to get there, providing you've A, found the right lair, and B, he's there, because he's got drakes and spirits guarding this lair all over the place. Not that it's not a treacherous climb in the first place to Mount Vapor, but if you go and you want to see you want to see Icewing, bring a gift.
Yes. Icewing is happy to entertain visitors, provided you make it worth his while.
I'll say you're not wasting his time.
If for some reason you are able to get there, but you fail to bring a suitable gift, he gives you time to go and get one and come back.
Yeah.
But you better do that, or you have offended a dragon, and those who offend dragons do not tend to be long for the world. Given Icewing's extensive network of spies and informants, he won't actually need to do much himself in order to see that the offenders are brought to the appropriate justice, as he would consider it.
Or the appropriate end, as he would consider. Yeah. So remember that Shadowrun novel, Never Deal with the Dragon? Yeah. Bring a gift, make it worth his while, or don't show up at all. There is that. But when dealing with Icewing, because he is an elder dragon, he's very old, he's very knowledgeable, he's very powerful. Outcast says that dealing with him means you need to overcome his capacity for illusions and deception, because he is a master manipulator, mover, shaker, and you're not going to find anybody who's better at what he does, really, than Icewing. How about we get down to his actual drakes and other servants? Because, again, he's Dollmaker for a reason. He's got 30 or more drakes that the Outcast has been able to discover. There's probably more.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Which is like at least twice as many, if not 3 times as many as any other dragon.
Yeah.
Some dragons only have a couple. Mountainshadow, I think, has several, but nowhere near like Icewing. Drakes everywhere.
Yes.
So many drakes that despite the fact that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are mentioned. Anyway, he's got a lot.
Rathan, Talanian, Crispel, Markic, Yuichotol. Six by name.
So 6 names, and then at least others. 2 dozen others in other capacities. Yeah.
Then he's got name givers, also as servants that work for him. He's got a Tiskrang, the gilded one. He's got Spiral, Icarus's arguers, Brigand's Hands. I'm not even reading that one right.
Bryn's Band.
Bryn's Band. Sorry, my handwriting was sucked on that one. Yeah, Bryn's Band, and then Hunters, and then he's also got Spirits. And my favorite one of them is named Ghosts Scales, because Outcast surmises that Ghost Scales is actually Yuichotol's spirit. Because once upon a time, Icewing and Yuichotol actually mated and had their own little clutch of eggs, so I'm kind of curious who those dragons are and where they ended up, but that's a whole different ball game from here and there. So yeah, Dollmaker's got drakes and name givers working for him, and spirits that he's conjured as well. Again, that guard his lairs, run errands for him, messages back and forth. So
yeah, he's also got a group of horror stalkers that works for him, connected to the events in the Shattered Pattern adventure, which describes a cult of the Great Hunter that somehow got a hold of some of the eggs that had been in his care and the things that were done and the recovery of them. That also actually introduces at least a couple of the drakes that are listed in this chapter. Yeah, so I think the interesting thing here is that while Icewing has a slightly different, if just as extensive, network of servants and allies as Mountainshadow does, his relationship with them is characterized a bit differently.
Agreed.
Especially where he relies so much more on drakes. It's also mentioned that he did not shelter any communities of name givers the way that Mountainshadow did or that Earthroot did.
Yeah.
Highlighting that sort of different relationship and opinion that he has. Icewing is perfectly happy using name givers as pawns. There is the possibility that even a couple of the presumed name giver servants that he has might in fact also be drakes.
Yes.
Because he has so many drakes and they are so adept at infiltrating themselves into various things.
Oh, totally. All levels.
In much the same way that having involvement with Mountainshadow in a campaign wouldn't be that difficult, Icewing has so many servants and spies and whatever that you can have your player character groups get involved with them at various levels.
I was going to say, how can you not work Icewing?
Yeah.
There's so many ways.
If you want to, it is very easy to do so. Anything that he might want to have his claws in, he could have a drake act as a go-between, as someone who is hiring a group, or any number of things. So if you're going to be involving anything that's going to interest Icewing, and I'm sure there is plenty that will interest him.
He's got political maneuvers to make. He's got drakes and infiltrating name givers in all levels of government, both near and far, especially in Thera and probably in Thrall as well. He has an open door policy for name givers to come see him. Again, it's a little treacherous to get there, and you better bring something nice. And again, it's not just like you can sit down and have tea with him. Make it worth his while as well. But if you want to go, if you've got a legendary item, possibly that no one else can decipher or figure out any, key knowledges for, then, he's your guy. So that's just what I can think of off the top of my head. And, Josh probably has half a dozen more myriad ways to work Icewing into your campaign. I think it's pretty easy to do.
If you want to. You don't have to, but you can.
Yes. I have purposefully avoided working dragons into Earth Dawn from my players because I didn't want them to make the easy connection of Dungeons and Dragons, where I can't say dragons are more proliferated throughout the literature, but these dragons have their own, in Earth Dawn especially, have their own motivations, have their own things to do. They're not worried about what the name givers, or especially your party, is going to want to do with them most of the time. So I think Icewing is a nice, easy way to work somebody in, and I think that Shattered Pattern is like the next adventure I was going to run for my campaign anyway. So
Shattered Pattern is a solid adventure. I really like that one.
Yeah, I'm going to run that one very soon.
That one was written by Lou. I think the story and whatnot in that one is solid. I remember running that one and just had
an absolute
a good
blast.
time with it.
Good, because it's coming up on my campaign. I'm getting back to game mastering here soon, and that's going to be coming up for me because I've been playing a long time, and it's time for me to get back into running things and playing King of the World. Anything else we should bring up about Icewing? Because there's a lot.
Goals. So these are the things that would be of greatest interest to Icewing, and therefore, if you are running a game or an adventure that connects with these in some ways, you might look at ways to involve Icewing or perhaps his drakes or other servants in terms of that, as he may be willing to aid a group that is doing things that might be in support of those goals. First and foremost, screwing with Thera. Less of an opportunity to do that in the present day of Barsave, although while the Therans do not have a focused military presence anymore, with the Triumph having been captured and the downfall of Vivane and Skypoint, there are still Theran agents and spies and merchants and so forth that are operating in the province. And if there is anything going on that would indicate that the Therans might be trying some kind of new move to reassert some degree of control, Icewing would be very interested in putting a stop to that. If something is going even farther, where a group might be hitting more directly against Theran interests, particularly if you are dealing around in kind of southwestern Barsave amongst the ruins of Vivane and the Theran presence kind of across the line there in Rugaria and whatnot, Icewing might be willing to support activities there that are disrupting Theran activities. So that's one.
Yeah.
Anything that would strengthen Thrall or perhaps help Icewing reassert some degree of control or influence over the Kingdom of Thrall. Again, little bit interesting to deal with in the present political situation, but absolutely something that he would be interested in. And then probably the one that is in some ways easiest to incorporate if you're interested in it, and that is screwing around with the Cult of the Great Hunter. Like, just destroying them.
Yes.
Because of what happened in Shattered Pattern and the events there, any group that is going to be mucking about with the worshippers of Vergegorm, if it comes to Icewing's attention, is probably going to get quite a bit of support and or intel to aid them in those tasks.
Absolutely. Anything else?
There's a little bit of interest. Obviously, the story of Ardelia is entwined with Icewing because of her connection with the Blue Spirits and the possibility that she could be the key to having the Drakes become a self-propagating people. So that would be something that could potentially be of interest if you're going to be mucking around in, again, southwestern Barsave, Carafad, Landis area. As we revealed in Empty Thrones, Ardelia is back in Barsave and is in that area, though, undercover and trying to maintain a low profile because the attention of dragons tends to mess her life up significantly. So that is something that could potentially draw Icewing's interest, which could potentially lead to conflict with Dvilgaynon because of Dvilgaynon's interest down in that area with Carafad and whatnot.
Yeah. So Icewing's got a lot going on and can obviously, in 19 different ways, be utilized in somebody's campaign. So I think that's...
If you want to get into that kind of like potential high-powered NPC backer, mentor, or potential antagonist, depending on where the player characters are coming down on things, that could certainly become an interesting idea. Much like his moniker, Icewing, I think probably the thing to keep in mind with regards to Icewing in terms of a character as a personality is that he is cold and calculating and does not have the growing affection for the younger races that Mountainshadow seems to be developing.
Yeah.
Or that, say, Earthroot has. Icewing is, in some regards, kind of suffering still from the metaphorical injuries dealt at the hands of the dragon's wayward children, and that informs so much of the way that he operates. And there is a certain amount of wounded pride and vanity that is involved with him that makes him, if you are useful to him, a good ally.
Yeah.
But pretty dangerous if you cross him.
Absolutely. Who wants an Elder Dragon as an enemy? Not me. Just saying. Not me. So that should wrap up this edition of our Arrowentical podcast, episode 98. Icewing, if you have any questions, anything we brought up that needs further clarification or Josh can expand upon further, please email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
That wraps it up. As of this recording, the Phasgothia Kickstarter wrapped
Closed.
up.
Yeah.
Closed as of this past Friday. Of course, when this episode goes live, it will have been closed now for, probably 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Successful. It didn't quite get to where we wanted to in terms of overall numbers. Sort of number 3, not counting the original campaign, is sort of third in terms of number of backers and funds raised, but still like right in the same place that the others have been. We've been pretty
very respectable
steady,
numbers.
Very respectable numbers. I think the funds raised for Mystic Paths, which was the second highest, was inflated a little bit because of the number of limited edition books or special edition books that were available as part of that. I think kind of inflated the numbers a little bit just because of the price tag on those. But still, very respectable. If you somehow missed the Kickstarter for whatever reason, keep an eye out. The PDF we're hoping for Phasgothia will be available sometime early in the new year. We're hoping to have it released in January. It depends in large part on how quickly artwork gets turned around and layout can be finalized.
Fair. Oh, and I think the email just came out that they're going to tack on the coin.
Yes. The $40,000 stretch goal for the campaign was to mint a sort of pledge coin modeled as sort of basically a Phasgothian Theran coin.
Yeah.
And while we didn't actually hit that goal, we sort of decided as thanks to everyone for backing that we would go ahead and produce that anyway. So if you backed it when the surveys come out, you can back to get that if you want. And if you don't want to get it then and you want to get it later, that's fine. We will have a stock of them. The 25th anniversary pins are sold out. The last of those got snatched up as pledges in the campaign. So if you didn't get one of those, you are
missing out.
You are out of luck. Those are limited time. Those are obviously, we are now a couple of years past the 25th anniversary. Coming up in a couple of years, we've got the 30th. 2023 will be the 30th anniversary of the release of Earthdawn.
Absolutely.
And so we actually are kind of starting to think about what we might do for that.
Fair.
Because it takes time to make stuff, and we need to start the planning now. Give us a year and a half.
Yeah. No, we'll take ideas. So until next time, folks, it is time for you to go make the dolls work for your legend.
Good night.
They can't all be winners.